day or evening to you, wherever you are, in the name of the Lord. I'm Ty Alexander Huynh, elder minister and teacher of Mashiach Yeshua, Christ Jesus. Years ago, when I thought I should pick a new racing number to move on from my first one, 373, I picked 383, even though I got spiritual guidance that suggested my new number should be 374. I saw 374 in a dream vision of a crossroads sign that also had 373 in it. But because I was also very wary of blindly accepting just any dream and vision, and I still am for very good reasons, I decided to use 383 instead, because I had an affinity for cyclical or palindromic numbers that are the same forward and in reverse, which 373 was. 383 also totaled 14, since 3 plus 8 plus 3 equals 14, which means God's promise delivered in which only He can bring. And I felt my new racing number represented a new stage of life and ministry for me. So it was logical to choose a number that totaled 14, because it would be a move forward from 13, which I had noted before that my first race number, 373, totaled to 13, which means God's promise in which only He can deliver. Of course, 374 also totals 14, but because I did not trust every single piece of spiritual guidance, and I don't believe I got further guidance related to what number I should use, I ended up choosing 383. It was only years later that I found out I should have used 374 instead of 383. The Lord had 383 pop up in my life many times, and I thought it was a good number linked to the next phase in my life and spiritual race, until I found it linked to Psalm 38:3. There is no healthy part in my flesh because of your indignation. There is no health in my bones because of my sin. My shift in using 383 coincided with an onset of asthma and respiratory problems, which began in 2016 in relation to focusing on helping and pleasing others too much. So being unhealthy, as Psalm 38:3 states, was a reality for me. Later, 383 popped up in things that I felt the Lord didn't want me to do or pursue, like doing excessive work in anything, including creative and ministry projects, because it was often coupled with guidance in the number 272. That number has much guidance associated with it related to my self-neglect. I first talked publicly about this in the Stop Rebuke thread, as well as the meanings behind 374 and 373. See that thread for more details. I will just summarize here. 373 and 374 linked to Psalm 37:3 and 37:4, which talk about delighting in the Lord and focusing on building loyalty and trust in God through righteousness, and the Lord giving us our desires for it. My new life in Christ and ministry with racing number 373 went with Psalm 37:3's focus on building trust and loyalty to Christ and delighting in the Lord. However, in the years of ministry since, I have been overworked in the spiritual race and life in general, which the Lord had often reminded me of by popping up the number 272 and 273. The Lord recently gave me big reminders and guidance related to those numbers that said I still needed to stop working so hard for others and neglecting myself. I give all the details of that guidance in the Stop Rebuke thread. There I show how the Lord gave me very inspiring personal guidance through His creation of the galaxies in the ARP 273 galaxy cluster. Here, though, I will share what I've learned about 383, which there is also stellar galaxy guidance, along with things the Lord recently had me notice when I was in Florida this month. I had noticed a billboard boasting 383,000 views when I was driving near Orlando, and I felt it was something the Lord wanted me to talk about publicly, because He had also popped up 383 for other people to guide them in things that were not good. Obsessive social media use and broadcasting. You can see the billboard boasts about having 383,000 views a week, and I immediately connected that with the excessive pursuit of getting viewership, likes, or clicks that is common in social media. Over the years, I had noticed many news stories of people getting killed while they were taking photos or making video or comments for social media. The Lord has also guided me to avoid making a news channel or publication because people working in the news and social media often become obsessed with getting news stories and sharing them. When I saw how the Lord made the ARP-273 galaxy cluster link to spiritual guidance, I also looked for stellar numbering that linked with guidance related to 383. I found a galaxy named NGC 383. It doesn't look very interesting, but when I found out it is a double radio galaxy that has giant X-ray radio wave jets coming out of the supermassive black hole at its center, I understood why God had linked it to 383. You can't see the radio jets in the Hubble image for NGC 383, but these jets, I learned from a recent NOVA episode about black holes, are made when the black hole consumes a lot of material and periodically it expels excess energy in the form of powerful jets shooting out from the poles of the black hole. What does that have to do with sin and social media? The radio wave jets coming out of black holes that consume everything within their reach is analogous to people on the internet doing the same thing. They obsessively collect information and share it indiscriminately, whether the information is true or not, like a black hole consumes everything indiscriminately. This is a big problem in the church as well, where I've seen people who I would call prophetic gluttons, but the Lord simply calls false prophets, as I noted with Zechariah 13 in the Stop Rebuke thread. They share all kinds of spiritual teaching, interpretations, and guidance that is not true and not from God. Obviously, the Lord is having me link the 383s with Psalm 38:3, stating how we can suffer under God's anger because of sin. People don't just suffer, they also die, as I noted with excessive broadcasting with social media. Many sins are associated with this, like gossiping, libel, and bearing false witness, which also break the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbor when unvalidated rumors and lies are spread. Idolatry and greed, which is idolatry, is also found in excessive and inappropriate social media use. Because of the pursuit of and idolization of fame, attention, money, yourself, sharing, gossiping, etc., which often happens only for selfish gain. Believers shouldn't be seeking inappropriate attention on social media or anywhere, really, like in the entertainment industry, where it is common to seek fame and make yourself an idol to the world. And for the average person, constantly posting things about your life, especially intimate and sexual things that attract the wrong kind of attention, is not for any of God's people to participate in. The internet age has created a new kind of narcissism, or self-love and self-absorption that is disguised as a common and approved way of connecting to friends and the world. However, if you've kept up on news, you know that use of social media can be very harmful, especially to girls and teens. The rise in depression and suicide over recent years is in part due to the effects of social media and its inability to really solve the problems of society or improve depression. People are feeling bad and hopeless because of so-called idealized depictions of life on the internet that are absent in their own lives, but those depictions are also only empty shells of real life. We need more than snapshots and disconnected relationships in our lives. I believe the Lord called this empty virtual life to attention when Facebook renamed itself Meta soon after a whistleblower testified before Congress about their disregard for harmful social media practices. They pursued profits by increasing the spread of harmful content, even though they knew it harmed people. I have long noted that an internet virtual life is only half a life, and Facebook's rebranding to emphasize a virtual metaverse life by changing its name to Meta actually reinforces what God thinks of a life absorbed in technology and the internet. Meta in Hebrew actually means dead, or she died. And a very interesting connection with that is Mark Zuckerberg, a founder of Facebook, announced the name change last year on the Jewish holiday that celebrates the death of Sarah, Abraham's wife. God didn't have me write about 383 just for its link to social media, though. After I saw the billboard, but before I went back to get a photo of it, I tried to find it on the internet by searching for 383,000 views. I was surprised to see so many 383 links to things that have to do with sin and the Lord's anger. Because so many links popped up, it's obvious the Lord wants me to speak of them with other guidance I already saw related to 383 and things we should not pursue. Marijuana use and drug use. The Lord had guided me about recreational marijuana and vaping as something linked to Satan even before I saw God connected it to his indignation with 383. I had tried to counsel young Christians to stop vaping and marijuana use and said, like tobacco use, they are things not appropriate for a person of God. They are addictive, and marijuana is a mind-altering drug. But unlike alcohol use, which is not a sin in itself, becoming dependent on illicit drugs like marijuana, heroin, opiates, etc., is related to the sins of drunkenness, addiction, and excessive use of chemicals. So to further reinforce marijuana use as a sin, I found the Lord connected 383 with the following. A 2013 study found that 383,000 out of 2.8 million addicted marijuana consumers were 12 to 17 years of age. A long-closed 383,000 square foot building would be licensed for marijuana growers in Michigan. A study found 383,000 college students tried marijuana for the first time during the past year from data gathered in 2002 to 2013. 383,000 marijuana plants were found and destroyed in an illegal farming operation in Mendocino National Forest, California. Unrighteous use of tithes and ministry funds. When I looked for the billboard on the internet, I quickly saw a 383 link with the Mormon Church buying a lot of land in Florida. In 2013, a company owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, bought 383,000 acres of land for over $560 million for commercial use, for profit. Because of what the Lord taught me about tithes, offerings, and sacred money, I knew this 383 link had to do with misusing money that belongs to God, not the church. The church is only a steward for God's money, and it is actually stealing from God, just as he says in Malachi 3, if his money is misused. When I looked at the LDS Church's dealings with land buying, I was dismayed to see they have spent billions of dollars in profit-making enterprises of many kinds all over the world. God's anger here is in the misuse of sacred money, like tithes, as well as in the sins of dishonest gain and the breaking of the third commandment, misusing the Lord's name, since the LDS Church is not transparent about how they use donations, and they, as well as many other ministries, use the Lord's name in falsehoods to generate donations, like false teachings of mandatory tithing and great prosperity for givers. I would also say that it is inappropriate for ministries, if not a sin, to use ministry funds and resources for profit-making enterprises that are unrelated to ministry work. Didn't the Lord lash out at the merchants and overturn the money-changing tables set up at the temple on the temple grounds? Yeshua Jesus yelled at them, "Take these things away from here. Stop making my Father's house a place of business." And he would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple grounds. What kind of steward are you if you use money meant to support God's ministry and help people when it is used for ventures that are of little benefit to the congregation and community? The Mormon Church argues that what they do benefits God's kingdom and helps to prepare their people for tribulation times by hoarding food, supplies, and money. However, I'm afraid dependence on material resources will be of insufficient help when judgment comes to destroy the harlot Babylon and unrepentant mankind at the end of this age. I don't want to suggest here that it is wrong for ministers to participate in profit-making ventures. The Lord has guided me in making money apart from ministry, as I know he has done for other ministers. Churches and ministries as organizations, though, should not be participating in commercialism that is unrelated to their ministry work. The Mormon Church obviously thinks their use of money is appropriate, but how easy it is for even the elect to be deceived by false guidance and teaching. The Lord is saying here it is a sin to misuse his money, so all ministries should take heed. Seeking notoriety, fame, and prestige. In 2020, a young athlete died in a car crash after she broke the indoor rowing record by rowing 383,000 meters over 62 straight hours. Like seeking attention inappropriately with social media, seeking fame and prestige is idolatry. I've heard people, even Christians, say they want to make a name for themselves in their pursuits, but they don't realize how God hates that. The builders of the Tower of Babel in Genesis also said, "Let's make a name for ourselves." But God saw their hubris and scattered the people all over all the earth and created the separate languages to prevent their coming together so easily again to make for themselves fame and superiority. Destroying the environment. This is a sin that is not often talked about as a biblical wrong, but in Revelation 11, the Lord talks about destroying those who destroy the earth when he returns. The 383 link with this is in the 383,000 gallons of oil that were spilled from a pipeline in North Dakota in 2019. Deforestation, uncontrolled carbon emissions and waste disposal, polluting water, damming rivers, overfishing and hunting, and other bad management of world resources is a cause for many curses upon peoples and lands around the world. God's judgment is shown in severe weather events and climate change, as well as in more localized curses or tribulation in areas that have been badly damaged or managed by human development. I've seen news reports over the years of economic and other troubles coming to areas where rivers were dammed or natural resources were destroyed, like in the Amazon. Dependence on science and vaccination. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, I said it was the Lord's judgment on both the world and believers, and he has since confirmed that. So when the world is fighting COVID, they're actually fighting God. And when they're depending on vaccines, medicine, and science to save them, they are misplacing their value when it is righteousness and dependence on God that will save. However, I've also stated that I do not take it against any believer if they get vaccinated. Because of the prevalence of sin in God's people, many in the church and other believers have died in the pandemic already, and that will continue for people who do not see God's reasons for it. The 383 links for misplaced security in science and vaccines are in a record 383,000 vaccinations done in a day in Pakistan last year, and Florida said they only did 383,000 COVID-19 tests in 2020. Sexual immorality and birth control. Using birth control in itself is not a sin. It is sex outside of marriage that is sin. So God linked 383 to 383,000 women in West Africa who started using modern birth control in a social welfare and family planning program in 2017. Instead of promoting unwed sex with birth control, society should be teaching abstinence and moral sexual behavior if they want to improve the health and well-being of women, children, and families. It is inevitable that curses will hit families and communities because of their continued sexual immorality. So truly bringing society to well-being must include getting people to stop their sin. Blind faith in false news, conspiracy, and teaching. When I saw a 383 Lincoln vote counting with an article talking about 383,000 votes counted in 2020, I knew it had to do with people's blind faith in the unvalidated allegations of a fraudulent or so-called stolen 2020 presidential election and other lies and false or misconstrued news. The Lord taught me to be more discerning of information and to validate facts and teaching, especially to test and examine prophecy and spiritual things as stated by Paul in 1 Thessalonians 5:19-21. We should examine things closely because lies and deceit have increased exponentially in the information age. False miracles are widespread in our time as well, for that has been the working of Satan. Scripture does not teach us to give blind faith. even to prophets, but we are to examine and test. The Lord said to put any prophet to death who promotes the worship of another God, even if he is backed up by miracles. So God's people should be more discerning of information as well as spiritual guidance and teaching. Believing in lies or twisted truth doesn't just make you throw truth away, but it gives hooks to the enemy and lets you be manipulated with misinformation, which unfortunately led to the insurrectionist riots in Washington, D.C. on January 6th last year. That was a direct attack on God's foundation of a righteous government process that is meant to maintain law and order. Never mind that parts of law and government are unrighteous. That does not negate the authority God gave to government and proper lawful process. For there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God. There was no proof of a fraudulent election even after hundreds of court cases and recount attempts. So using rebellion to stop authority that God founded without sufficient cause is obviously something that would anger him. Any reason he linked 383 to voting. Despite being proved wrong and misguided and evidence of attempted fraud and cover-ups by former President Trump and his officials have popped up, I still hear large percentages of believers and Republicans still support him and believe the 2020 election was stolen. If you are among those who still support Trump and lies, then you need to know the Lord has shown me that Donald Trump is linked to Satan. Other sins. By now you should take very seriously what the Lord has given with guidance and the real-world evidence related to 383 and sin that was revealed. I was very surprised with how much I found. There is more that I won't share here, but I've covered the most important topics. I'm certain if you look for God's guidance in your own lives and circles with 383 and other numbers that I've talked about, you'll find relevant guidance. I will just end this with 383 links that go with sin in general, which includes sin in the church. The estimated death toll from South Sudan's civil war from 2013 to 2020 is 383,000. South Sudan used to be part of Sudan, a country I am familiar with because of John Dow's book, God Grew Tired of Us. John talked about fleeing his home in Southeast Sudan in the late 1980s when he was a young teen, because his country was being taken over by Islamic militants. He had to flee to refugee camps in a border country, often only with other boys for company. There was much ethnic cleansing and atrocity committed upon the population at this time and through later years of civil war when South Sudan was formed. Much of the Christian population of which John belonged to was killed and persecuted. The tribulations of the people John shared in his book were hard to listen to, but something I noticed was that John wondered why God would bring so much judgment on them, but he never understood why. However, I saw John shared a recurring dream in the book that God gave him to give more wisdom about why judgment came. Years ago, I explained the dream in John Dow's dream and showed how God is telling his people that their knowledge about Satan and curses is incorrect. Ultimately, it was sin that brought judgment upon Sudan, and believers suffered just as much as others because of it. The Lord is connecting 383 here with the tribulations in Sudan and South Sudan as a reminder that his people often do not understand what they do wrong and will fall to further tribulations like the COVID-19 pandemic if they do not change their doctrine and ways. A study done in 2016 estimated there were 383,000 inmates with severe psychiatric disease, almost 10 times the number of patients with mental illness in state hospitals.